Hello, Brilliant Labs viewers. Welcome to Katey Howes.
Hi, everybody.
So, just a little introduction of who we are. This is the first of what we hope to be many segments called Brilliance in the Making, where we meet up with professional makers like Katey. I promise that I'll give her a chance to talk in a few moments. And we really break down the significance, the implications, the pedagogy, the philosophy, all of the important things that we see behind the scenes of what the students are making or what our youth makers are making in the classrooms. So Katey, thank you very much for being here on this first maker experience of Brilliance in the Making. Katey is an author of a beautiful children's book called Be a Maker, and we had the opportunity last week to have her speak to a number of listeners, young and old makers alike, while she took us through the read aloud. So if you haven't picked up a copy of her book, it's incredible. But in talking with her, there are so many more conversations that she brings to this ecosystem that we hope to dig into a little bit. So, Katey, thanks again for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's kind of an honor to be part of something called Brilliance in Anything. So I'm thrilled to be here with you and to share what I know and what I feel and what I'm experiencing in the world of making things either on my own or with classrooms full of kids. It's been quite an amazing journey being part of this. You
Would you
just
mind
took
sharing a few details of that journey to where you are now?
Oh, sure. So I guess the word maker didn't become part of my vocabulary till probably about 5 years ago. But when I look back, I know that I've always been a maker and I just didn't know what to call it or how to feel proud of it. I've been writing since I was a very young child, and I was making books of poetry and illustrations from as early as 8 and 9 years old. We
Wow.
have copies of them. I wish I had dug them out for you. Um, that I was making with my friend Rajan on the playground in second and third grade, and we'd take our handwriting paper and we'd write poetry and draw pictures and staple them down the side because once it's stapled, it's a real book, right?
Right?
Right. And then we'd try to sell them to our friends. Nobody was buying poetry books from 8 year olds back in the
So what you're
day,
saying
but
is you
we
were a
still
young
were making them,
capitalist.
and I've still got them because my parents, they're those wonderful kind of parents who save everything, which is fabulous and embarrassing. Um, and I did a lot of making through camp craft and various things like that because I worked at Girl Scout camps and I worked in a lot of theater productions where I would work backstage and build sets and things like that, as well as being a writer. Surprisingly enough, I became a physical therapist rather than a writer fresh out of school because I really love both physics and neurology because
Nice.
I'm totally a nerd
Hey.
and I love it. And so I worked in brain injury rehab for a long time. And that was a place where I became a much more technical maker. I learned to
Right.
make materials and equipment for people, adaptive equipment, and to change their houses up so that they had what they needed. And through all of this, I also began raising three young girls
Wow.
who didn't always have role models in popular culture and in books that showed them that it was okay to embrace a creative side beyond, I don't know, what people thought of as traditional female creative
Right.
roles. And I wanted them to see that, I've got an Allen wrench and a blowtorch, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And I wanted all the kids that I worked with and worked around to see that there's a lot of different ways to be a maker, and that we can keep finding new ways to be a maker too. So, I mean, I
Wow.
make books, I make cakes, I make messes. I just started weaving. This is my first hand weaving.
Oh, cool.
Um, so I just started learning to do that. So we always just need to expand and try something we haven't tried before. You look at something and you think it's beautiful, it's fascinating, it's whatever. Go give
That
it a try.
that's
Start.
awesome. I hear this a lot, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm cutting you off, but
No.
you mentioned that the word maker really wasn't, or make or making, and we have all these derivatives, but it starts with make. Wasn't in your vocabulary until 5 years ago. Do you think that there's something special or accessible or easy about that words that allows people to incorporate it into their vocabulary? Is there something that happens when we start to use that simplistic word of make that liberates us and allows us to share?
I like the positive attitude, the way your question was phrased kind of gives me there. Yes, I do. I think that when we claim something as our own identity, it gives us a feeling of power and confidence. And maker has such a broad scope. It sounds powerful. It
Yeah.
sounds like something you do, put something new in the world that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
That idea, especially to a child, is just really, I don't know, it's very empowering
It is.
that you're putting something new in the world that wasn't there before. You
Yeah.
have that gift, and it's fabulous. So I have all these notebooks on the shelf behind me, and it's where I put my ideas down. And I tell kids when I go to schools that every inventor, every maker, every writer, every artist has notebooks because we can't always act on our ideas right away. But in this one, I started making a list of the ways we use the word make in the English language because it's so weird. There's such a variety. And I just sort of started as a, isn't it weird that we can make time and we can make lunch and we can make a friend and those things don't look anything like one another, but we use the same word for them?
I love it.
And yeah, it was just me like messing with words in my head for a long time. But then the list of words and lists of things we make started to feel more like a poem than it felt like a list. And then that poem started to feel like it had an arc, that it had a story to it, that it had a bigger significance. And that's really where the book just took flight and sort of took over and had to become the book that it is and not just a list in my notebook.
I tell you, I know you know the significance of what you're saying. There's a beauty in the complexity of the word make, and I've noticed, as we begin to use the word make in this context of maker learner environments, we tend to italicize it in an email because we know that, for whatever reason, we're using it in a different way in our vocabulary that we're presenting it to. But it's not a new word. Just as you're making this list, and I start to wonder about the that word, its role in our vocabulary, why we feel that we have to italicize it as something new, because we're not changing the definition. We're still using it very much in the same context as what we have always. I make pancakes. I make a bench. I make materials. I make a course. I make a conversation. And there are other words that we use to describe the same process, but it lends, and I think we've talked about this before, it lends itself to how diverse a material set makers have available to them. And they can combine raw materials, but those materials don't necessarily have to be physical at all. You talk about yourself as a young poet. Those words, they they didn't have shape or size or matter, but you were still making with them. And so
Absolutely.
one of the things that I really love about the accessibility of the word make, it's already in our vocabularies. And as we begin to use it and reflect on why we use it, if you're 12 years old or 60 years old, it starts to redefine our conceptualization of material at its core. Maybe material doesn't have confined to physical properties.
I think that we could have a very long, deep philosophical discussion about this, and I love that. I'm up for that. It's one of the reasons I put in the book one of the things the children make. It says, make a universe inside your head.
Yeah.
Because I love to talk with the kids when we read this in a library, read this in a classroom. I love to talk with them about how you could make something that is only yours.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't need any materials, that wherever you are, whatever you have, you don't need the stuff. You can create it right up here.
Yeah.
And it's no less real
Right.
because people can't touch it. It might even be more real in many ways, at least, to you, to your heart, to your soul, to your future, because who knows what you're going to do with that later.
What do you think it is that leads you to have this feeling? And maybe you have the same feeling, but sometimes I leave a classroom and or I leave a meeting, and I feel that kids get this more than adults. Do you get that same feeling?
I do. I think that kids are much more willing to be flexible in their vision of who they are and what they could become than many of us are by the time we hit adulthood. I'll have to say that it was very tricky for me to switch careers and to
Yeah.
say I was switching careers from physical therapy to writing
Right.
books. Not the least of which because it was writing picture books. And sometimes people are like, seriously, can't you write something longer than that? But that's a discussion for another
Yeah.
time. Kids are really able to re envision themselves when they're given permission to, when they're
Right.
given space to. And they have such huge imaginations, not just for what they could make, but what they could be. And I think that's fabulous. So, yeah, I think that they have a better sort of willingness to embrace the maker culture. And I think when we give them the space and the words and the ability to do that, it really builds their confidence. It really makes them feel powerful, not just to see themselves as a maker, but for them to realize that other people see them as a maker, that it's recognized outside of them.
Yeah.
That makes them feel powerful and strong and confident. And I want to give them all that.
Yeah. There's something really powerful and empowering about being a maker and instantly knowing that you are a part of a conversation, of a community, and that's one of the things that I love that you present in a very simple way. And I mean no insults, by
Simple
that,
is
in your
hard.
book. It's beautiful. It's so simple. So, uh, what is the larger implication of how do you present it in your book? Why do you present the role of community and collaboration the way that you do?
Well, I think that there is a tendency right now for people to be, and I'm not meaning right now during
No.
distancing and things like that, but at
Right.
this point in history, for people to be a bit isolated
Yeah.
because we have access to so many things through screens, through videos, through whatever. We don't always have to go out and physically connect with people. Um, and there's also this tendency to be a consumer, to take stuff in, to absorb stuff through
Right.
YouTube videos, through, whatever you're watching, but not necessarily to put stuff back out.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that the maker mindset, the maker movement in general has done has been to reverse that. It's to use some of those platforms to encourage people to not be more distant, but to be closer together, to actually come together and make things together. And I think that's essential for sort of the future of our planet
Yeah.
because you can't have all the skill sets you need yourself. You can't have all the ideas you need yourself. You have to bounce them off other people. You have to listen and respond and sometimes fight it out because that's where the amazing things come from.
Yeah.
And just from being a bookmaker, a book creator, I know that there's no way I could do it all by myself.
Right.
I have friends who self-publish and they have to find illustrators or do their own illustrations
Right.
and worry about the marketing and worry about the just the printing, all of these things. And I'm amazed by the fact that they can do all of those things because when I make a book, there's a huge team of people, and I feel that every one of them makes it so much better than what I started with. I'm
Right.
only bringing some of the pieces, and I think that's true of just about everything that we make.
Yeah.
Someone else with a different perspective, with a different skill set, can just help elevate and take it to something you never knew it was going to become. And that's, I mean, that's fabulous. And so when we can use these digital things to bring us together instead of bring us apart, that's just the best of both worlds right there.
I think it's really neat to think about you know each conversation that you have, each skill set that someone is bringing to a team, through collaboration, through creating a community around what it is that you're making. That becomes a material in and of itself. You know, the thing that you are making is a product of all of those conversations, of all of those instances of collaboration, and we can't do it in isolation. You know, it makes me think of our role as a human being, you know, our role as humanity versus that of technology. And there was this great conference, you know, a couple of years ago, where an economist, you know, they were talking about automation, and he doesn't fear automation or artificial intelligence or machine learning, because there are qualities that a machine learning interface will never have. They will never be human. And I probably shouldn't be talking about definites right now, because, you know, maybe there will be, and there's all kinds of great advances in technology, but there is something about collaboration that will always remain truly human.
I think so. And I think part of what it does is collaboration helps us have motivation and confidence, because you can doubt your own abilities.
Yeah.
You can underestimate your own abilities. But having other people around you, even if they aren't trying to encourage you necessarily, like that's not their main goal, just their interest in what you're doing helps encourage you to keep moving forward. And you get these spontaneous bursts of just things becoming great because there was more than one person working together. And I also think that having a community lets children see how far their impact can sort of ripple out.
Right.
Because they think that what they do is small. Sometimes they're given the impression that because they are small, what they do is small or has a small effect.
Yeah.
But it's not true. It can have a big effect, but they need to be able to see that. They need to have the people around them who can reflect that back to them.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got a couple more questions, but they're all blending together, this wonderful entanglement of making. I want to talk to you a little bit about sustainability. Perhaps now more than ever before, we as a society are taking a concerted look at the things that we make, how we consume materials, and the role of sustainability. And so in a world where there are so many things that have already been made, why make more stuff?
It's a perfect question. And it's actually something I talk to kids about when I present at schools. I put up a slide and I said, why do we make more stuff? And usually we'll have had a discussion already about what the kids like to make.
Right.
So I will say, you know, we have tons of cars. Why are we making more cars? We're in a library full of books. Why am I making more books? Don't we have enough? Isn't this enough to last you your lifetime? And then I want to hear from them, not from me.
Right.
You know, I'm played out.
Yeah.
I want to hear from them. Why do we make more stuff? And one of the things kids tell me is that we make it because it's human nature. That might not be the way they phrase it, but they're compelled to create.
Right.
Like they have ideas and they feel like they must make them manifest.
Yeah.
And the fact that children are powered by that and that they recognize that that's part of what makes us who we are, that's amazing to me. But also they have more practical things. They'll say, well, to make some money. Well,
right.
Yeah, that's a good one. And some of them are embarrassed to say things like that, to say to a teacher, to an author, to a presenter, well, I want to make money. Yeah, don't be embarrassed. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right to want to make things that make money. They say we make things because the things we have are broken.
Right.
Yeah, good idea. Or because the things we have don't work efficiently. Oh, there's a good one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're making electric cars because the cars we have aren't good for the world. Mm-hmm. Good idea, kiddos. Because we want to make people feel something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely make things to share our feelings, to share our experiences, to share our point of view. That's a good reason to make something.
Yeah.
And we also keep making new things because people need help in new ways than they used to. And so the old stuff doesn't work in the new environment.
Right.
And people need different kinds of help now than they used to need. So we create new technologies that can provide that for them. And we think of that as medical technologies or digital technologies, or even just physical things to help people access their world and their environment. I mean, nothing is static in this world.
No, and these
And
concepts of prototyping, ideation, and innovation, so often we make the mistake of thinking about the word innovation as meaning, new and the latest technology. And we don't have to use the latest technology in order to be innovative. We can look at a whole series of solutions for problems from yesterday or last year or last decade that already exist. And what are we bringing as makers to that table that is new? And so we're recycling, we're reusing ideas, philosophies, materials, and through that, comes innovation. And I guess that's really complex to instill in a classroom setting sometimes, or in a student who says, "Hey, I want to make money." But maybe that's that role of a maker facilitator and maker educator, to break that down. I want to make money. What's behind that idea?
yeah, absolutely. I think that it takes some discussion and it takes examining our motives a little bit. And it does take us setting an example where we say, sure, that's one way to make it. Is there a way we can make something that uses materials that have already been discarded? Is there a way we can make things that are more efficient?
Yeah.
Um, and getting them to consider the larger implications of what they make is, it's a great teaching point, and it's a great thing that sort of shapes their way of looking at the world and their way of giving to the world as we move forward, when they're thinking about all the implications of what they make and what they make it from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Katey, thinking about the implications, I wanted to ask you, we kind of constructed this question: are you only a maker if you use, an insert material here? Do you find that there's a connotation right now with maker learning environments and technology, and and we at Brilliant Labs, we are a technology advocate organization advocating for technology and the purposeful use of it. Do you find sometimes though that all of the other materials that are traditionally used in making get lost in that culture of using new technology for making?
I think we're at a time where that's shifting, and it depends on where I am. So I do go to schools all over the country and talk to kids, either physically or virtually. And I often start off a presentation by saying, "How many of you are makers?"
Hmm.
And in some schools, every hand goes up right
Awesome.
away.
Yeah.
And in some places, there's four hands out of
Right.
300 kids because they thought makers means, a coder or
Yeah.
someone who makes a robot or someone who knows how to weld. Like
Yeah.
they have a limited sense of what it
Right.
means. And some of that just depends on what they've been exposed to so far and how the word has been used. I think that it is becoming more expansive in the common parlance. I don't think as many people are keeping it limited, but I do think that there has been sort of a bit of a trend where, people think immediately of maker fairs and a giant beast robot dragon walking down the middle
Yeah.
of the fair breathing fire. And if
Yeah.
I can't create that, then maybe I'm not a maker.
Yeah.
But then we're reinforcing different messages to these kids.
Yeah.
We're saying, no, if you can fold origami, you're a maker.
Yeah.
If you can make a Minecraft world, you're a maker. If you can cook pancakes on the weekend with
Yeah.
dad, you're a maker. And we're helping them redefine the word
Yeah.
and to claim it for themselves. And I think that that's an important shift that we're going through right now. I love that Brilliant Labs is helping to support that shift. And especially right now, where kids can't get to the school where there
That's
might
right.
be a maker space, or
Yeah.
to a library or a community center where there's a maker space, it's important that we reinforce to them that every place is a maker space. It
Ah.
is the person who's in it and what they're doing that matters, not the materials they have or the space that's around them or how many 3D printers it has. That's not what defines it.
That is a very poignant statement to end our conversation or transition into the end of our conversation.
Gee,
I
I
love
tried
it.
really hard to make it poignant. No.
Did you have that written down somewhere? That's why you're an author, right? You just have these nuggets of motivation written down that you can pull
It's
from.
amazing that they come out as words because I'm not as good at the talking as the writing. That's why we have editing and revision, so I don't have to talk. But yeah, that worked out well this time.
Wow. I I tell you, it's such a great message of collaboration, and we see this in our projects all the time when teachers apply for a Brilliant Labs funded project, or we go into to facilitate a conversation about making a makerspace. You know, we are going to in a school of 12. I don't know if you're familiar with the geography of Atlantic Canada, but there are some schools that will have 12 students. K to 12, you know, and then there are other schools. I'm looking at one right now at my window that has 2,000 students in it, and you know that's not unique around the world. It's like that, but each one of those students has different interests, different capacities. We can percolate and grow different appreciations for materials. And so through collaboration and, you know, in a maker space or any maker environment, you can't help but ask yourself or ask others, what are you making? And if that response tends to be something that requires coding or cooking, or it doesn't matter. It's what matters is that you're sharing, that you're collaborating, that you're trying to build a diverse skill set. And we often use the term a continuum of materials and skills and competencies. And it's really encouraging to see that happening, you know, across our schools in Atlantic Canada, our community centers, and around the world. So thanks for digging a little deeper into that.
No, thanks for having me for this conversation. It's one of those things that I love to talk about, and it's great to be a part of the conversation with all of your teachers and everyone involved. I hope that people reach out via Twitter, etc., so we
Yeah.
can just keep talking about this further on. Seriously, if you want to chat about makers and collaboration, I'm there for
Uh,
it.
that's awesome. Well, that's the final question I was going to ask you. Where do you go for more inspiration?
A lot of places.
Okay.
There is no one. Uh-oh, something just happened.
Oh,
Where did I go? Am I back?
yeah,
There we
you're
go.
back. Where
My
do you
computer
go
just.
for
Where
inspiration?
do, So there's no one spot for me to get inspiration. I feel like the world has so much inspiration. Sometimes you have to narrow it down.
Yeah.
I do a lot of reading, and I have three children, so I read a lot of books with them as well. And sometimes it's not the book, but their reaction to it that's inspiring to me. I live on a wooded property, so I'll go out and walk in the woods. Nature gives me a lot of inspiration. And so it just sort of, I don't know, it brings me ideas and peace and energy, and whatever I need comes from that time outside in the wilderness a bit. But other times, I mean, I tend to be more of a recluse. It's a terrible thing to say. I'm a little hermity. I like to be on my own with
So
my
you were
thoughts.
prepared for the events over the last 8 weeks?
I have been social distancing way before it was cool. I am all about the stay away. But sometimes I do need that group of like-minded people to just be able to just spin things out and bounce things back and forth, because I don't think inspiration really happens in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It starts that way, but it doesn't grow that way. And so I do have groups of other writers and artists and just creative friends, a couple of STEM teachers who I love to talk to, just throw ideas around with. But for me, it needs to be people who I kind of trust with what's inside my head, because what's in my head is often in my heart too, and I'm really tender about it, and I'm kind
Right.
of protective of it until I let
Right.
it out there in the world.
Yeah.
So having those people you trust who have an appreciation for your skills and your way of thinking, and who also think differently so
Yeah.
you can stretch your way of thinking, I think
Yeah.
that's a big place to find inspiration, and even more to grow it,
Yeah.
because that's really important.
It's interesting that you said, before you let your thoughts out into the world. I often find that that is part of that refining and that ideation and that prototyping that we're doing. You're thinking about something when you're having a cup of coffee, when you're going out for a walk, and it's really fun. When you are sharing that thought, and sometimes my friends get a little frustrated because I pause and they're like, "What? Just say what you're." I'm like, I'm sorry, I was lost in thinking about your thinking, and that's a recurring trend in maker literature and maker culture. You mentioned that you had a few favorite books that you go to for some maker centered learning inspiration. Did you want to share those?
Absolutely. Sure. So I've got a little stack here, and I will share a couple with you that I think are great to inspire young makers, but also are inspiring for me.
Awesome.
This one is called Maybe Something Beautiful,
Ah.
um, and it doesn't fit in the screen very well.
Well, I'll make sure to put a
We'll
link.
make sure to let people know a
Yeah.
little bit more about it. But Maybe Something Beautiful is based on a true story of kids and artists transforming a neighborhood through murals and art outdoors. And I think that the idea that you can take the entire sort of feel, the mood of a place, and change it by coming together, working together, and adding a new layer of beauty to it is just really inspiring and exciting. And I think it also talks really well to people right now who are home and
Mm-hmm.
maybe doing chalk art or putting signs up in their windows or
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And I think it's a good place for kids to start thinking about how can the small things I do, if I let other people see them, if I share that stuff that's in my head and in my heart,
Yeah.
how can that affect someone else? So that's a great one. Um, Another one I love is this one. It's called With My Hands, and it's poems about making things. It's
Oh.
by Amy Ludwig Vanderwater, who's a lovely poet, has many poetry books for children. And it's just a series of poems about things you can make with your hands. And everything from a boat to a parachute to pictures with glitter. Um, and I think it's just a good place to start saying there's always something you can make. And so
Sweet.
for me, just paging through there, partly it's responding to the poetry and the rhythms and the meter.
Right.
Other people, it's music for them that gets them inspiration.
Yeah.
I think music gets me too distracted. There's too much going on for my brain. So I stick with the poetry, but also just the idea that simple things like folding a piece of paper,
Right.
we can find beauty and inspiration and innovation. So that's a great one. And I'll just give you one more
Sure.
that I love. This is How to Code a Sandcastle.
Yes.
And you might be familiar with that one because we got to
Josh
talk to
Funk.
the techies too. There's nothing wrong with being the tech kids. That one's by Josh Funk and Sarah Palacios. And I think the Girls Who Code organization
Yeah.
sponsored that one, got that one made. And it's a wonderful introduction to how the regular world, the normal physical world, and the idea of coding and the digital world, the technical world, can kind of overlap. And we can understand things that are a little more esoteric in a very physical way. And we can take things that are very physical and turn them into that code. And so I really love how both simple and beautiful that is. And it gives me a lot of inspiration to think about how we can look at things in more than one way.
I find the closer that we get to those aesthetic reactions for what we make and the entanglements between the materials, the more we make, and that motivation grows, and to have those more conversations, and it's so great when you see that traditional coder or the one that only works with technology to instantly have that reaction of beauty, and seeing the implications beyond what it is that they've always been making. And what better way to do that than through children's literature?
Well, I do think that books are a great way to get inside of kids' heads and to get them thinking differently. And I'll say that the physical therapist in me, the one who loves the neurology and all of that, will say the more different directions, the more different systems you use to put input into the brain, the better the brain connects, the more connections it
Yeah.
makes. So if we can do things that are visual and things that are audio and things that are kinesthetic, all those different venues of bringing an experience into the mind helps the brain make more connections and be more plastic and be
Yeah.
more flexible. And that's what we want for the kids. So giving
Yeah.
them a chance to do something on a computer, great. Giving them a chance to dig their hands in and get messy, great. Making it make noise, even better. Like just add all those layers for them and give them all those experiences. And put it in a book too, and put it in a song. It's fine. That's great too.
Well, I tell you, you have taken a boring digital, video call, and you have made it very multi-sensory. So there's all kinds of different areas. My brain and everyone else's brain, I'm sure, firing their neurons right now. Katey Howes is the author of the children's book and a number of other children's books, some forthcoming, so we can't tell you all about them. But she's the author of Be a Maker. It's beautifully illustrated by her illustrator. Can you tell us her name there?
That's Elizabeth Vikovic,
And it's published by?
Learner Publishing Group.
There we are. And I picked up a copy at our local bookstore. I just gave them a call and they brought one in. It's also available on wherever you buy books, Goodreads and Amazon.ca. And it would be really helpful for Katey if you, even enjoyed this conversation. Leave a comment on or a review from Amazon. Katey, thanks again for this complex conversation. We've dug into a lot of concepts, and I can feel that future conversations are going to be based on this one. So I hope you don't mind if we send you a few tweets your way.
I would love that. I'd love to engage with your audience a little bit more and get to know what they're thinking about. Seriously, a lot of what I write is inspired by the kids and the teachers and what they're talking about in the classrooms and what's interesting to them. So I need to get that feedback from them just to keep creating what I create. But also I'm just fascinated by the maker movement right now and
Yeah.
just the space that it's taken up in hearts and homes and classrooms. I think it's a great thing for the future of our world. So yeah, hook me up with all of your tweets. I'm happy to respond.
Well, you need more to think about on your morning walks in your wooded area, right?
That's right. You'd be amazed the things I think about out in the woods. It's so weird.
Katey, thank you very much. We hope to hear from you again soon. Have a great day.
It's been great talking. Take care.